Imagine me standing here. I'm a girl, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, and then I start to take off my clothes, and then I get completely naked in front of you, and then I invite each and every one of you to take one piece, just one piece of clothing off, and then I tell you that I'm free bleeding intentionally. So don't be worried when you see something. I'm just trying to frame the kind of conversation, the journey that we're going to have this evening. Unfortunately, I'm not a girl. I'm not a mother. I'm not a woman. So my invitation to you will be different. My invitation to all of you is, can we all be on our feet? Can we rise, please? And what we're going to do is to hug the person next to you. And you're going to hold on the hug for 15 seconds. But the countdown, wait a minute, the countdown will start when everybody has got a hugging partner. Okay, do we all have hugging partners? Frankie? All right, okay. One more. Gifty, you don't have a hugging partner? Once you do, we'll start the countdown. Okay, so let's start the countdown. 1, 1,000, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, 6, 1,000, 7, 1,000, 8, 1,000, 9, 1,000, 10, 1,000, 11, 1,000, 12, 1,000. Now gently and slowly, sensually, let go and take your seats. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Laboni Dialogues started in this very space, following the journey of one man who was a drummer. Today, we are ending Laboni Dialogues in this very space with a journey that we are all on, which is our sexual lives. I always share the Laboni Dialogues flyer to a group of friends in my contact. One of them responded after I shared today's edition with her, and this is what she said. Yahaya, so my name is Yahaya Alpha Suberu, by the way. I'll be anchoring this event. So she said, Yahaya, seeking sexual freedom? Aha. I'm not even getting any. And now you are talking freedom. A bay with 3 exclamation marks, end of quote. It is said that not making a decision is in itself a decision making. And I think not having a sex life is in itself your sexual life. This is to emphasize that we are all on this journey together. When Frankie called me and asked if I'll be available to help with this event, I was actually on one of my adventures, which had taken me to an island surrounded by the Yellow Sea. Yes, the Yellow Sea, and then the Sea of Japan. An island called Jeju in South Korea. I had actually gone to the Museum of Sex and Health. At the entrance of the museum, there is a text, an inscription, and this is what it says. Sex is paradoxical, have 2 sides. The next text reads, sex is part of nature. It is one of the basic desires. Frankie went on to say that our guest is the author of sex lives of African women. My mind at this moment was all on sex, sexuality, desires, pleasures. So I said, yes, I'll be available without even thinking if I'll really be available. By this time, I was actually standing in front of the section for the Egyptians, and I was looking at different sexual positions with Egyptian goddess, and it was accompanied by a text, and I read, "In ancient Egypt, there was no taboo about sex because sexual activities were recognized as natural pleasure. Unlike other cultures, ancient Egyptians believed that the earth was God, and they called the earth Geb, and the sky was goddess, and they called the sky Nut or Nat. So the goddess was always located above the god. I must confess that got me excited. Because for now, I think that I have an excuse, a historical fact to make requests for my desires. Girl, woman, mother, boy, man, father, welcome to NYU Accra Gardens for another edition of Laboni Dialogues. For the last 6 months, my 11-year-old has been asking me some strange questions, and it would always be at dinner. And for the last 6 months, I've never had any single one of them correct. So I was thinking that, well, somehow when I think about it, even though they are silly, but they're kind of interesting. So I've been thinking, how do I come up with my own questions? Maybe make it more difficult. But as a typical Ghanaian, instead of trying to think outside of the box and find ways to answer his questions, I've decided to come up with questions that are more difficult so he can fail. So the last question that he asked was, if Pothole was a business, what would he say to his customers? I mean, how could I have thought of an answer? And then he said, oh, yes, if Potholes were a business, what would he say to its customers? And then guess what the answer is? Anyone? Well, he said, buy one, get 5 free. So I have a question for you, and this is just testing my questions before I go to him. The question is, if this event is ticketed and the ticket is supposed to be, of course, this is a mature event, so if this event is ticketed and the ticket is supposed to be beads, what color of beads would it be? Excuse me? Red? Anyone else? Purple? Anyone else? Nana, I know you know this. Gold for sure, yellow. So thank you very much. Thank you. Anyway, let me just ask, in case the light goes off, will you be able to hear me? Yes. Okay, that's good. And then let me also ask, in case the light goes off, do we have people here wearing the Akosombo Kanya beads that we can give some glow? Or I hope we do have enough people. I'm by no means suggesting that we have to get naked. It's just to expose a bit of those beads so we can have some illumination. I was given a copy of our guest's most recent book, which is Seeking Sexual Freedom. This was given to me yesterday. I spent all night, even though I know that it's not healthy, because we're told that any night that we don't sleep, we're losing 1 day on our longevity. But I will tell you, I'm happy to die a day earlier after reading this book. Luckily, we do have quite a few of them on there. It's a story so beautifully written, well told, that it was very, very easy for me to not think about my longevity. A shrine in Benin has asked our guest to come back after the success of this second book. So let's make her trip back to Benin sooner than it would have been. So let's all grab a copy, have conversation. This conversation, we cannot exhaust it this evening. There are so many things that I think we probably have to create a book club and continue the conversation. So let's do that. So in conversation with our guest is someone who reads more than she eats. And she says she would like to be paid to read and read and read. And this person is no other person than Kina Lekimani. Thank you so much for coming. So girl, boy, woman, man, mother, father, shall we welcome to NYU Accra Gardens, our guest for this evening, 19th edition of Laboni Dialogues, Nana Darkoa Sekyiamah. Thank you very much.
Was this to do that? Thank you for the preamble. Nana, welcome. First, let me say that, where's Frankie? Come, Frankie. Come, Frankie, yes. Yes. I think that, yes, stand by your podium. I want to thank you on my own behalf, on Mommy's behalf, on all the writers you have hosted here, and for all the readers that have come, for you, that you created this space. And I remember when you said you were going to do it, and you did it. And it hasn't been easy. We've talked about the fundraising situation, whatever. But as we know, this is coming to, we hope what will be a temporary end. Maybe we'll have a smaller space, but really I wanted to say that you have created a space for us to come time and time again, covering a breadth and a multitude of topics in our creative and artistic life here in Ghana, and we thank you so much for it. Thank you very much. Nana, there's so much to say here. I don't even know, I don't make a list of questions. So I'm first going to piggyback on the lady who said, I'm not even having sex, right? And you have been at pains to get us to be more expansive in our view of sex and pleasure. So, answering that, how did you arrive here? And why is it a mission for you?
How did I arrive here in terms of how did I arrive at the space where I write about sex and try and encourage people?
And try and shepherd us through this journey you insist we must be on.
Okay, first of all, I'm not insisting that anybody should be on any journey, right? But one of the realizations I had many, many years ago was that I had grown up not being told anything about sex, merely being told, you don't have sex, right? And somehow being raised with the idea that sex was bad and that girls who had sex were bad, right? And I would watch shows like Obra, and there was always a young girl who'd fall pregnant, and then my mom would be like, see, this is what happens when you mess around with boys. And then when I got my period, it was like, yes, you definitely can't mess around with boys because you get pregnant. I didn't know there were ways of, one, preventing pregnancies. I didn't know that having sex does not automatically result in a pregnancy. I definitely did not know that sex could be something that was pleasurable. Sex was always presented to me as something that was terrible. But actually, before all these conversations, I was told about not having sex. I had actually been sexually assaulted as a child. And one of the realizations I've also had as an adult is actually we make children vulnerable to sexual assault when we do not talk to them about sex, when we do not tell them about their bodies, when we only present sex as something that is bad. Because what happens when a child is sexually assaulted is they somehow feel it's their fault. There's this bad thing that they are somehow implicated in, right? And then for me, as an adult, owning my sexuality and my pleasure was a way of taking back power, taking back some of the power that had been stripped away from me as a child. But then also, realizing that sex is something that can be done for your own well-being, because it's enjoyable, because it helps you relax, because it's good for your mental health. And frankly, I feel like everything we're told not to talk about is absolutely the thing that we should talk about, right? So this is how I got to where I am now.
Thank you very much. So you start the blog, and then you write that groundbreaking book, The Sex Lives of African Women. And in this book, you are taking us through to the rituals. You are giving us a portion of sexual history that goes against the grain of, Africans, the Victorian thing that we got from colonialism. In fact, you have a whole section on the encounter and what it has done for us. And then in the second part of the book, I really recommend this book, by the way, because she has tips. You know, when people tell you, please be a good person, in fact, this is a side way. My mother's assistant, Josephine, is sitting there. We went to Josephine's wedding, and the pastor said, let the light of Jesus shine in the middle of your marriage. And I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I thought, wow, that's interesting. And then he left it at that. There were no tips. There was no passage on how, there was no to-do list, there was no how do you do this, there was nothing. And you realize they do that a lot in Christian, anyway, whatever. Nana has, because this topic is quite big, and it's frightening. For a lot of, I'm just saying, in the book, in the second part, she has tips. Every single recommendation that she lays it out step by step by step. So it's also a to-do book. So Nana, what I want to ask you is, what this evolution of how you are approaching things, why this way in particular? Because it is not intuitive that after you finished with Sex Lives of African Women, you would do this, you would give us back the knowledge of our rituals.
Okay, so you mentioned the blog, right? So I started blogging about sex in 2009, a blog called Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Women. I started it with my college bestie at the time. And in a way, it functioned a bit like a diary. If I had a sexual encounter today, it will be on the blog tomorrow. It was my way of trying to figure out my sexuality. And it was also my way of holding myself accountable, because I had realized that for most of my 20s, I had very much been a good girl, and in fact married the first man I had consensual penetrative sex with. And somewhere in that first marriage realized, oh my God, am I only going to be with this one person for life? And my answer was no. So I left because I wanted to explore. So my 30s was what I called my whole era, right? And so I wanted to document my whole era to figure it out for myself. I'm one of those people that I understand things by writing about it. So the only difference was I was just publishing it. But it found an audience. It resonated with women. And women started DMing me, sharing their stories with me, and asking me questions like I was an expert, which of course I'm not. I'm still not an expert, by the way. So I said to them, why don't you write about it? We publish it on the blog, and let's have people weigh in. And I think that's how the blog became popular, because people were sharing, people started series, people created. In those days, I did not think of digital security. Absolutely strangers, women I have still not met to this day, I gave usernames and passwords so they could access my blog and publish whenever they wanted, because I could not keep up with the demand, right? And after some point in time, around 2014, I was like, wow, if only the world knew the incredible experiences we have as African women. Because I also felt frustrated by the representation of African women I would see in the media, particularly when it came to our bodies, when it came to our sexuality. I felt like we were always being portrayed in very limited ways as women who were hapless victims of practices like FGM. And the idea was if you'd experienced FGM, there was no access to pleasure, or women who were vectors of diseases like HIV and AIDS, or women who were constantly pregnant. And I was like, but that's just one part of the story. There's so much going on, there's so much fun stuff, there's so much freaky stuff. And so I wanted to write a book about the fun stuff, right? And I thought, let me start interviewing women in different parts of the continent, which is basically how Sex Lives came to be. And then when Sex Lives was published, I felt like there were some people who were disappointed because they expected an anthropological kind of study. And I was like, but those stories already exist. I've read them. Sylvia Tamale has been writing. You guys, you don't know Sylvia Tamale. It was very clear people didn't know Sylvia Tamale. I was like, okay, fine. You know? And then I wanted to go on an eat, pray, fuck journey. And so I thought I would combine the two. People don't know the rites and rituals that I know exist. Let me write about that and also take them on my eat, pray, fuck journey. So this book is trying to give the people what they wanted. And my eat, pray, fuck journey.
In fact, I like that you talked about people don't know that the anthropological studies have been done. It's very hard. Anthropological things upset me, right? So, because it's so pathological, I don't know. Anyway, the thing that I want to say about that is that I know that Bell Hooks is one of our feminist ancestors, and she was an academic, a feminist scholar, and I think in the late 90s she decided to decolonize how she wrote, and therefore make books more accessible to, I hate the word masses, but the non-academic types. And so she would, basically it would be academic text, but it was absent a lot of the footnotes, endnotes, all the jargon, just really accessible information that the academics were sitting on, research interpreted. You write very much like that, by the way. And so you don't feel like, when you're reading the book, it doesn't, and it is, of course, a study of rituals. There is an anthropological side to it. But because you write very much in a very decolonized way, it doesn't feel like you are being fed, the anthropology. Is it something that you got inspired by Bell Hooks or other writers to do, or what? How did you find that particular voice and way of doing things, writing?
I think it's a combination, right? Because I feel like as a writer, the more you write, the more you find your voice. I'm looking at some of the writers in the room. And I'm definitely a huge fan of Bell Hooks, she's definitely one of the African-American feminist theorists who gave me the language around feminism. And then I discovered Amata Edu, or rediscovered her, actually, because like all Ghanaians, I read Amata Edu's work in secondary school. But then after I understood feminist theory more from an African-American perspective, I was like, who are the African women? Writing about feminism, and I found that through the works of Amata Edu, through her fiction, which I feel is more like a social reality style of writing. And so I feel like that's, if I have inspirations, those two women are definitely my biggest inspirations. And I think I just try and write in a matter-of-fact voice, right? Like, yeah, in a matter-of-fact voice. Yes, thank you.
It's very readable, enjoyable. So now we'll go to read us a passage.
Okay. So, first of all, Adra from FCA is here, right? Is Adra from FCA here, or anyone from FCA Accra? No, okay. So I need to start by, what's the other? Oh, one of my marks has fallen out. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read from chapter 5. It's called Senegalese Sex Secrets, From Waist Beads to Jean Douay. And I want to thank the family of Amata Edu and the Foundation for Contemporary Art Accra for giving me permission to cite for free words from Amata Edu, a huge inspiration of mine. Beads are deserving, beads are worthy. Wash me some beads to warm my skin, a token of love, a gift for my kin. Amata Edu. The knowledge of waist beads is essential in understanding femininity and the art of seduction in West Africa. They come in many colors, shapes, and sizes. In some cultures, even baby girls are adorned with waist beads. In others, Girls start wearing beads after they have undergone traditional puberty rites. We wear beads for multiple purposes. For instance, it is widely believed that waist beads can make a woman more shapely. The constant movement of the beads up and down your hips over time will give you an appealing roundness. Beads also help you to maintain your figure because they help you gauge when you have gained too much weight or indeed lost too much weight. There have been many times in my own life when my beads have slowly rolled up from my hips to my waist, sending me a clear message that it was time to be more thoughtful about what I was putting in my body. I didn't grow up wearing waist beads, but in my early 20s, on a visit back home to Ghana, I bought my first set. And since then, I almost always wear a stack of 5 waist beads around my hips in various shades of gold and white, the colors that I think look best against my nakedness. I feel sexy when I wear beads, and I love the reaction I get when a new lover discovers them against my skin. Above my bed, hanging low on a curtain rail, are 2 rows of heavy, silvery colored beads. They are fair, the type of beads colloquially known among Francophones as casse-couilles or ball breakers. This is because during sex, they can be used to stimulate the man pleasurably or to cause pain. On my dressing table, I keep a jeweled black jar filled with urée, a rich, soft, charcoal-like incense designed to burn on an open coal fire. I bought these items from Mben Laube, a Senegalese woman's doctor. Mben told me about the different types of waist beads women in her country wear. The most common type is the bin bin, rows of tiny beads strung together and worn in layers. These are the kind I am most familiar with and wear consistently. They are relatively no fuss, and unless you're wearing really low-cut jeans or some similar outfit, no one needs to know that you have them on. I think of them as your basic starter kit in the waist beads department. But there is a whole universe of beads and a world of stories that can be told through the trade of these items. Waist beads have evolved over time. And whereas in the past, our ancestors traditionally made beads using whichever materials they had to hand, including wood and seeds, a lot of waist beads today are made from crystal. One of my favorite places to shop in Accra is Suntrade Beads in the Salam Down neighborhood of the capital. It is co-owned by Katie Toda Dagadu, a Hungarian woman who has been a resident in the country for 50 years. When she moved to Ghana for love, Katie also fell for the rich culture associated with the world of beads and has spent the subsequent decades learning everything she could about the varieties and uses of these decorative objects. When I last visited her shop, we had a chat about the significance of the names traders at the famous Koforidua bead market have bestowed on their wares. There is Akosombo Kania, which literally translates as the lights of Akosombo. These beads are made of glass, which gives them an iridescent quality, which is why they are named for the Akosombo Dam, the main source of power across much of Ghana, even supplying electricity to some neighboring countries. The glow from these beads provides a guiding light to a woman's lover. Katie informed me that those same beads are used to make rosaries in Ghana and available for purchase from the gift shops of some churches and cathedrals in the country. And then there are other types of beads that also express what the wearer wants. There are waist beads called check, spice, and some cheekily named bumper to bumper for the woman with frequent lovers. Across the West African sub-region, beads have a long history as currency, jewelry, and so much more. In the pre-colonial and colonial era, women used beads to secure cloths worn as undergarments, but their popularity faded in the 20th century because they were portrayed by the colonialists as primitive. Today, they are considered valuable and are items that mothers pass down from generation to generation. Beads can be a part of a woman's diary, for instance, a precious commodity that belongs just to her and her future daughters.
Thank you. So, in a nutshell, however you want to talk about it, this study of yours, and I mean, in the first half of the book, she goes to the Krobo area in Ghana, she's in Senegal, she's in Tanzania, she's in Kenya. I'm sorry, an alarm. What, in a nutshell, have you learned or come to understand about our rituals associated with women's sexual freedom?
I mean, what I've understood is we had so many ways in which women, primarily older women, passed down knowledge about the body, about sex, about sexuality, about the transition from girlhood to womanhood. Some of those traditions persist. Many of them have been modified. Many of them have been reshaped by Christianity, by Islam, by modernity, right? And what it seems like we've lost is the more radical elements, right? The elements where there was more frank conversations about sex and sexuality. But some of these practices still exist. So for example, in Senegal, I learned about a ceremony that the Wolof used to do quite regularly, and they probably still do, but in a very different form, called the hahas. And those used to take place pre-wedding ceremonies. And in a large open gathering, the bongo man would lead a chant, and ask, where do you want to put your lava? And then you point to your breast. Where do you want to put your lava? And then you point to your bottom. And this was done in front of everybody, children, older people. And so it was a way of speaking about sex and learning about sex. And it was done before marriage, so you kind of knew what to expect and knew what you could ask for. But now when it happens, if it happens, it's much calmer because the imams have criticized it and said it's not, it's not the proper thing. And even when it happens after the marriage ceremony. So in a sense, the purpose is lost. And for me, that's the sort of the shame, we're losing some of these rich traditions. And I'm not trying to advocate for going back to the past wholesale, right? I'm saying let's apply a Sankofa lens. Let's take those aspects of the culture that are helpful, that are useful. Let's infuse that with the best of who we are today, the best of what we know today. And let's introduce more rites and rituals into our life. Let's create spaces where we teach young girls about their bodies so that they have their period and they don't think they are dying or something is happening to them, right? Yeah.
There's also a lovely section on labia pulling among the Buganda. Because it seems as though, it's not just, and in when you transition to the second part, there's the middle section where you talk about what colonialism has done to us, right? Because in a sense, it's not that we got colonized and then there was it was replaced with another model of sexual education. Because the West, they don't talk about sex at all. I don't think so. And so you make a really good point about what it means for girl safety and all those issues that you cover in dealing with what we have lost. Now, how are we going to get it back?
I feel like this is how we get it back, right? This is part of my contribution, right? In a sense, learning and relearning about these rites and rituals, sharing it, and I think it's a collective responsibility how we get her back. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I am very much invested in teaching her about her body. She knows about periods. I did not know about periods at her age. She asks me all sorts of questions. I answer every question that she asks me as openly and honestly as I can in an age-appropriate way. I plan when she's 8 to connect with other women, feminist mothers, and say, let's organize a puberty right for our children. So I feel like we can all do this in our own own ways.
What, in your opinion, is the actual impediment to African women seeking sexual freedom? What is preventing us? What is an impediment in our way?
I mean, I feel like many, many things, right? First of all, there's a lot of shame associated with sex. And one of the things I would like is for us to get away from shame, right? And for us not to think of sex as a shameful act. And I think that's one thing that's getting in the way. The fact that we don't talk about sex, the fact that people don't get the opportunities to learn about sex, the fact that people don't get to explore their sexuality, the fact that sexuality is presumed to be heterosexual, the fact that the state right now is trying to ban people's sexuality and identities. Like, where do we stop the list, right? There's so many factors, I think, that prevent us from learning about sex. You know, the fact that women just have too much work to do,
Yes.
too much labor, you know, running around after everybody and have no time for themselves.
In fact, there were two things that I wanted to discuss, and you've raised it because I am in my anti-labor era of feminism. I see labor everywhere. So the business of, like, you know, you carry the entire household and you do your work and you come, and then, you know, how are we? Because if we do not disengage from the labor and all these contracts, there's a woman on TikTok who talks about the invisible contracts women have, and we have a lot you don't even know you signed on to them. How do we achieve? Because those are real. Because when it's not like men, honestly. Women bring a lot of issues. There are lots of issues in our lives, and, well, thank God, because, you know, we are more complex. But, so the labor thing is one. The other one I picked up on, but I wanted you to explore and to discuss. Somewhere in the book, you write about lack of resources and maybe poverty being an impediment to seeking sexual freedom. Something like that. But what I wanted to say was, it's not poverty. It's the patriarchal capitalistic notion that resources and money come from men. This is an impediment in our path to everything women want to achieve. We've internalized it, right? So can you talk a bit about the labor, the money thing, you know?
Yeah, I agree very much with you that poverty doesn't stop you from having a fulfilling sex life. In fact, I think I even mentioned the conversation I had with you, right? Where decades ago, one of the things you said to me, Kina, was, you know, it's us middle-class women and, you know, who have all of these issues with sex, and people in the villages don't have these issues.
Yes.
So that was one of the things I mentioned. But one of the things I also speak about in the book is the intersection of sex and money. So part of my research process was also doing workshops, and I did workshops with sex workers in Kenya. And one of the things I was asking them was, what does sexual freedom mean to you, right? And it was interesting to me that, obviously, different sex workers felt differently. Some sex workers felt sex work was also a path to freedom for them. And some sex workers were like, no, because actually I'm having sex with a client because they're going to pay me. There's no enjoyment there. It's really just about the money. So I feel like the issue of money and sex is complicated. But one of the things I was trying to own, because I write about experiences I went on, is I was able to have these experiences because I'm a middle-class woman with a certain amount of money, right? And so I'm documenting it so you can have the same experience if you want without picking up that tab. Yeah.
And in fact, coming back to your writing style, there is a lot of you in the text. I mean, your own journey. I don't recall whether it was like that in the first book.
I just had one story at the end.
Yes. But there's a lot of you in, because I think, why did you do that? I have an idea of why, but why did you do that?
I mean, I think it's also part of my feminist politics, you know, as a writer, and maybe that's where the bell hooks influence comes in, right? And that's what would, for me, not make me an anthropologist, because I think an anthropologist, you know, tends to take on a role as a supposedly neutral observer. I am not a neutral observer. I am implicated. Like, I am interested in this research for my own benefit, you know? And I am talking about my life experiences. You know, that's also part of what informs my writing. And I also believe that personal is political, right? So, and also I'm asking people to share super intimate experiences with me. I need to share those experiences too. Like, why am I going to ask you to reveal yourself to the whole world and not reveal myself?
Another passage.
Okay. All right, so in thinking about rites and rituals, I realized that I needed to understand a bit more about African traditional religions. And having grown up in Ghana, I was very, very scared of African traditional religions because, like, I grew up thinking it was evil, it was scary. Many years ago, I went to Bayer and went to a Shango ceremony. I was terrified because I saw people falling into trance. And so initially, I thought that as part of my research process, I needed to go back to Brazil. And actually, as part of that process, I started interviewing a lot of people from Brazil, which I think is really important to do. I'm a Pan-Africanist, so for me, whenever I write books about Africa, I always include the diaspora. You know, Brazil has the largest diaspora of Africans. So that was the plan. And then I met a trans woman from Benin, and she was telling me how many trans women are followers of Mame Wata. And then I was like, wait, why am I going to go all the way to Brazil, you know, to like learn more about Candomblé and Shango when Benin is right here? And I knew that they had a Voodoo festival every January, which I'd heard about ages ago. And I love festivals, but I was scared of going to a Voodoo festival. So my bestie, Kobe, are you here or you're not here yet? He's not here yet. What a bad bestie. Tell him when you see him. But he's a good bestie. He went with me to Benin, and we visited a number of Voodoo convents. That's what they call them. And so I am going to read an excerpt from a convent we visited in Porto Novo, which we found out recently is actually the capital of Benin, not Cotonou, like most of us tend to think. Yes. Members of the community in Kandevi were also keen to show me that they valued the education of girl adepts. Adepts are followers of Voodoo. I got the feeling that in the past, they may have been criticized for keeping young girls out of school and inside the Qurans, which are the sacred, secret places that only devotees can enter. A young girl came into the pavilion where we were seated and was introduced to me. She had clearly come from school and was wearing a uniform like no other. On the bottom, she wore a green A-line printed skirt that fell to her knees, which seemed pretty standard to me. But I had never seen a school uniform with a strapless top. The two older men who were acting as my interlocutors explained that being an adept doesn't prevent one from being educated. This young girl's uniform had been adapted so one could see the markings on her back and shoulders, indicating that she was a Voodoo devotee. I asked the men, is there hierarchy in Voodoo? I couldn't help but notice that the few women present at the ceremony had been introduced to me as new adepts. And apart from the periods they spent dancing, they mainly kneeled or crouched on a mat placed at the edge of the pavilion, while the men literally took up the rest of the space. Yes, Voodoo is hierarchical, they affirmed. Do you remember the old man who was here earlier? They were referring to the elderly gentleman who had been accompanied into the space earlier and gently guided to a chair. I remembered him because he was visibly trembling and frail. I hadn't even noticed that he had slipped away. But now, as I looked around, I could see he was no longer there. He is the father of all the adepts in this house, they explained. Then they pointed to a light-skinned man with a brown band around his head. He is the most senior of the adepts because he carries the Voodoo. The man who carries the Voodoo has the privilege of carrying the deity on his head from its shrine to wherever it needs to be taken. And earlier on, he had been responsible for bringing the divinity to the pavilion for the ceremony. Feeling like enough time had passed, I then moved on to ask one of the key questions that had started me on this odyssey to Benin. From some of my research, in pre-colonial times, if there was a man who appeared to be gay or was very feminine, that person would be considered special. Usually would have a spiritual role in the society. But that doesn't seem to be the case nowadays. I wonder if you have any thoughts. Olivia, clearly feeling my question wasn't direct enough, jumped in unsolicited, speaking directly to the adepts in French. I have a fair understanding of French. Ghana is surrounded by Francophone countries, a point underscored in secondary school where French is a compulsory subject. And so I understood that Olivia was asking why society discriminates against gay people. Martine, the interpreter, already knew that I had a decent grasp of French, so she sat still, only whispering to me, "Is that what you said?" I shook my head, but the interlocutors were already answering. That is how they were born. It is the voodoo who wanted it that way. Olivia continued, "So are they considered normal people?" Both men replied simultaneously, "Oui, oui." Maxine translated, "They are normal people." I decided to reiterate my question. So my question is, back in the day, it felt like society accepted those people as spiritual beings, whereas today we discriminate against such people. I was trying to understand the past and what had changed in how Africans treated difference. Olivia jumped in again. "LD," I whispered to Maxine. She's been more direct than I was, but it's okay. And I meant it. As a trans woman who provided a safe house for other trans women, Olivia had more skin in this game than I did as a middle-class, straight-person woman. Shall I stop here?
Buy the book. Oh, I don't know how much it's going for, but you guys can afford it because, you get your nails done and things like that. Where's my timekeeper? Should I throw questions or?
You can continue the conversation.
We have time?
Yes.
Okay. I want to go to the second part now and leave this very juicy. And the part that is very juicy, people, you need to read the book. In which you walk us through what we should be doing or how we can approach finding our own sexual freedom. And I mean, you have things that, there's a part where she goes to a masseuse, right? Yeah. I mean, I've been to a masseuse and, they ask you what you want done and, yeah. And so, oh, it's true. I'm sure we've all thought about it, have we not? Yeah, Nana goes there, pa. So I want you to talk about, in particular, why you felt the need to structure the second part and walk us through it. Like, yeah.
I think for me, that was born out of thinking, okay, how do I show many paths to possibly finding sexual freedom? Because there isn't one path, right? And I also don't think sexual freedom is a destination. I think it's a journey. And I was remembering a conversation I had with a woman I named Hawa in the book from Senegal. And she was talking about how she thinks back on her childhood and having an aunt who would spend ages creaming her body with shea butter. She just spent ages creaming her body, creaming her body, creaming her body. But now that she thinks about it, that too is pleasure. And I was like, oh, wow, because a question that I get asked quite often by women who feel guilty when they masturbate or do not know how to masturbate or are not sure how to masturbate is, like, if I feel guilt, if I feel shame when it comes to masturbation, what should I do, right? And so in having that conversation with Hawa, I had a bit of an aha moment. And I was like, oh, actually, like, you shouldn't just be heading straight to the spot. like you should just maybe cream your body and just do it and then like take your time, do it slowly, right? Just enjoy the art of touch, which is what led me to write one of the chapters in the second half called The Art of Touch.
Yes. Before I come to the audience, for those of us already grown into, I tell people that we have to work very hard as women to silence society in our heads. But, until, when you meet feminists like me saying these things, we're already like older. How do we get our children on the path of embracing their sexuality, being sexually free? Of course, I mean that in all the ways that are safe. What should we do?
I mean, I also have a chapter called Sex Positive Parenting, right? And for me, I think it's really about the basics, children knowing the proper names for the different parts of their bodies, right? Not calling, I used to call my vulva my wee-wee thing when I was a child. I mean, what is a wee-wee thing? So I've always been very intentional in teaching my daughter that's her vulva, to the point where a while back I slipped and said, your vagina. And she was like, that's not my vagina, that's my vulva. And I felt so proud, And I think it's as basic as that. Like, children should know the parts of their bodies. And my daughter will ask me questions. Like yesterday, she was like, your nipples, it has these black things around it. What is that? I'm like, it's normal. When you grow up, you will have that, And I think it's just being comfortable with your body. And it's just about also, I think, cultivating a relationship with your children so that they can talk to you about anything, they can ask you. If they experience some harm, they can come to you rather than feel like you're going to blame them. I think that's how we start. And for me, it's also really about being guided by the child. Once a child is asking you the question, then you have to answer. And I think you answer as openly and honestly as you can, because there's a reason why they're asking you these questions.
My son is here. Hi, Kobe. He thinks I'm too much. But one day, when he was like 4 or 5, right, we were sitting in the living room, and he would hide behind the chair and come out and say, Kotsi. Kotsi is the fancy word for penis. And then he would because even at that age, somehow he picked up that he wasn't supposed to say it. So then he would hide and laugh, ha, ha, ha. And me too, then I'll pretend like, oh, Kobe, really? I'm so shy. Then he would say it again and run. That's when I realized we could begin the issue of sex.
Yes.
And if he's saying Kotsi, we can start talking about things. And we've been doing so ever since. Sorry, Kobe. Questions? So I have a rule about questions. I don't want long preamble. And refrain from multiple questions. If you have contributions, maybe later she's here. But questions. Ghanaians like to be long with questions.
All right.
Yes.
Since I have the mic, I probably could start. And I'll do what you said we shouldn't do, so nobody does that. Yeah. So there was a point in the book where you have an invitation to attend a wedding in 5 years' time. I mean, I'm saying, who plans a wedding 5 years ahead of time? I mean, if you're the woman who wears the bumper-to-bumper bead, you probably would have had 3 children and gone through, three men before the time. Please add me to that list on the 8th of July, 2030. Anyway, Nana, as I mentioned to you in the conference room, and also, it was very, very easy to read book, and I really enjoyed it. And I think there's something that you've done with this book. I mean, today the issue of mental health is high, and one of the things they're telling us to do is to forest bath, expose ourselves to a lot of greenery. But I think mindfulness is all that they're talking about. I think for me, a summary of your book is seeking sexual freedom, using it as a tool of mindfulness. I think that was just so amazingly done, and congratulations. Thank you. Yeah.
The young man with the question. Is there somebody? Oh, he's the cameraman. Any questions?
Hi, Nana, and congratulations on the second book. I can't wait. I'm not going to ask you about the book because I haven't read it yet. But you introduced a very interesting concept of having puberty rights for your daughter at 8. How would it look like?
Thank you. Yeah, and you know that once I actually do that puberty right, I'll write a book about it. But I think how it would look like is developing the curriculum with other women, other mothers, right, who have girl children that they want to undergo that right, taking them away somewhere where it's just us, mothers and the daughters, and maybe other people who are educators, who have special skills, and just literally having like a 5-day workshop with them where we talk about your body, what you experience in your body, what you can expect when you start to have your period, what sex is, what it isn't, you know, what consent is, what it isn't, talking about the fact that sex can be pleasurable, talking about the fact that the best sex is usually actually by yourself, you know. I feel like, yeah, that's what it's going to be like. Yeah, I'm actually excited to do that. Yeah.
I mean, when I got my period, my grandmother took me back to the village for me to do the fancy rites.
Tell us about it.
Oh yeah, it happens on a Tuesday when they don't go to farming. So the primary thing is for the family to outdoor the young girl who is now of childbearing age. So we were around that time. There were maybe 3 of us that went through it at that time, and it happens often. They don't wait. We were put in a room. We had to taste salt and pepper, which they said symbolizes the pain and, you know, the flavors. My grandmother's friend came and told us about what we should be expecting about our bodies. Came and told us about what more we should expect in terms of puberty and what sex is, and that you could get, of course, the pregnancy bit. There was nothing of shame about it. They didn't go into like sex and pleasure, you know, but they just basically said, now you are at this stage and you are a woman. Even though the family views you as a child, these people out here, they need to know that this has happened to you because now you are of childbearing. I think I was like 11. And then we went, it was on a Tuesday, so nobody had farmed. It was my grandfather was the chief of the village, and went to each single household, and they had prepared food, and you would stay with the women, and they would celebrate you, and they would talk, and they would joke. And what I remember was that it made the whole thing less scary. Because, you know, my mother is a writer. She's just clueless. Like, when I got my precious, I go, now you can get pregnant. And I was 11. And just the week before, there had been an article about some girl in Angola who'd gotten pregnant at 9. So I was like, Mommy, 9-year-olds can be, you know. But I think it was good because my grandmother had asked my mother to do this. And even my mother was around. She appreciated it. But that's what I remember, being really celebrated. All the men and the young boys especially had to be home to understand that now this is, you know, you can't be messing. In fact, the idea is also that you have, in some ways, graduated out of your age mates. You know, like the girl is now, has transitioned into, yeah, it was comforting. It made the whole process less bewildering, I remember. Yeah.
That's really good to hear.
Yes, questions? Yes, there are 2. Mm-hmm.
Hi, good evening. Hi, Nana, how are you? So I have a question from a writing perspective. I was wondering if this book was already in your head when you were writing the first book, and if you kind of have a sequence of books in your head already, and if you'd give us a teaser.
So can I just say, Araba's book was one of the books that I cited. Araba Oforiakwa, her book, The Original Source, Find It. It was also one of the many resources I leaned on. Araba, so thank you for your work. And no, Seeking Sexual Freedom was not in my head at all, you know. but it came out of sex lives and realizing that people did not know that there were so many African rites and rituals related to sexuality, because I realized that some people expected that in sex lives, and that was not my intention at all. So this book was born out of that and my desire to have experiences and write about those experiences. And I know what my next book will be about, but I'm not in a hurry to start, but I know what my next book will be about. It wouldn't be as sex-focused as the first two books have been, but it will be in there somewhere.
Yay. Yes, you.
Hi, Nana. So you talked about puberty, right? And also, I just heard that you've been going to like the Kobo areas. I know the Kobos have puberty rights. They're called Dipo. There have been a lot of backlash against that puberty right. A lot of stigma, shame. What do you have to say about that? And if you think there are positive aspects of that puberty right, how do we enhance it and also change the narrative? Because the Kobo people have still upheld that puberty right even till today. I think in this month they are going through some rights right now. So I want to hear your take on that.
Yeah, so I actually write about Dipo in this book. It's the puberty right from Ghana that I showcase. I feel like with all our rites and rituals, you know, like with any rites and rituals, there are positive aspects, and there may be some aspects that I personally consider not so positive. So for me, as somebody who is not Krobo, what seems positive to me about the Dipo is the fact that it's a way of transitioning into Krobo womanhood, right? And becoming recognized as a full-grown adult Krobo woman. What seems to be not so positive, based on the interviews I've had with Krobo women, is the fact that if you haven't gone through it, you're not regarded as a true Krobo. You're not even regarded as somebody who can be part of certain discussions or certain meetings. And the fact that there's a virginity test, you know, as part of it, in the sense that you're expected to sit on a particular stone and get up 3 times. And if you can't get up, then it means, you know, you are not a virgin. And I don't think that's positive. But I feel like gathering girls and women together, teaching them life skills, which is basically what it is good and important. We all need life skills, right? But then also, again, what's not positive is the fact that if a girl is deemed to not be a virgin, you know, and has desecrated the shrine, because of course she hasn't been able to stand up from the shrine, her family has to pay a huge financial bill. Because you need to then pay for the shrine to be cleansed, right? Because you're seen as impure. And because of that fear, lots of people are having their children undergo Dipo at a younger and younger age, you know? And so I met with a current stool father, and he was saying they have huge discussions about this. You know, he is of the opinion that it shouldn't be for like really, really young children. But again, I feel like mothers make these choices because they are the ones who get blamed, you know? But I think it is for the Krobo people to decide how to, you know, what to do with their tradition and culture. But yeah, these are my thoughts.
I mean, in all the rituals that you chronicle, and of course, Africa is patriarchal. So there's a lot of misogyny and there's a lot of patriarchal kind of values or something wrapped up in these rituals for women. So yeah, I mean, the easiest thing they could do is just get rid of the thing about virginity. But hey, as a path of least resistance, and it's freeing. Next question.
Hi.
Hey.
So first off, congratulations on the book. I had a question about seeking sexual freedom as sort of a manifesto for women, right? Because I believe that a lot of your writing and the writing of a lot of people in our community is towards women because we are on the receiving end of patriarchy. But what I have learned in my sexual freedom journey is that you get all the sexual freedom, and if you are what I call tragically heterosexual, you still have to deal with men who have not been on a sexual freedom journey. And then the freedom gets very, very complicated, right? So if you were to write this book for African men, what does seeking sexual freedom look like for an African man? What would they need to start with?
It's a great question. It's a great question, Famia. And can I also just say, Fami is a dear friend, and she's the person who first read from end to end my messiest draft. So thank you, Famia. I still deal with men, you know. It's a problem, it's a challenge. Oh, but I have to say that I also feel like, especially the young men, they are trying, eh? They are trying. All the talking we've been doing, it is having some effect. So I have hope in men. I really do have hope in men. And I feel like this book is for men too. You know, this is actually, you know, the first, when I wrote Sex Lies, lots of men asked me, would you write Sex Lies for African men? I'm like, you write Sex Lies for African men. Why should I write Sex Lies for African men? But actually, also in this book, I interview men who I feel are a little bit ahead on the sexual freedom journey. Guys like, and I feel like men, you can't vouch for them 100%, right? Because they will embarrass you.
There's always something.
But I interview some men. I will name check one of them, Tapiwa, who is from Zimbabwe, resident in Cape Town, and I feel like had an amazing practice around self-pleasure that I felt everyone could benefit from. And yeah, I feel like men should be on their sexual freedom journey too. And I feel like a few of them are, more of them need to do it. And it's the men who need to take other men on that journey.
I mean, and to pipe in, you know, patriarchy makes power mongers of men. And this power mongering stands in the way of so much healing on their part, growth, because they will remain pretty linear, except they are power mongers. So they will have to give up being power mongers before they can be sexually free. Because everything that men engage in is about power. And power is just, if you're a power monger, you're pretty linear and uninteresting. Copy.
Before the next question, I must say though, you know, and I think I'll represent the men here. I've read the book, and I'll tell you that after tonight, my encounter with sexual partners will definitely change.
Well, good.
Because I think that there's just so much in the book that it's not gender specific, really. I mean, you're writing for women, but all the things that you talked about, we all can benefit from. So we are there with you, Nana.
Question before we go to.
Hello. That one person that has been disturbing Nana on Instagram. I'm Ugandan. And what caught my attention is the chapter on Sengas, the aunties in Buganda. I've not yet read the book, but I got it and I was going through. I don't know what you found liberating about the Sengas, the concept of Sengas, because from what we learn or what we are told, because the pudding and all these rituals they do, it's also spread. I'm from Western Uganda. Yeah. We hear about it. In fact, in schools, some matrons would try to force us to put, but some of us are like, I'm not doing anything to please a man, because it's centered around pleasing men. Yeah. The Senga's role is to prepare you for your husband. When I went to the city, to Uganda, and I was interacting with people who have been raised here, their conversations around sex, it was all centered around men. And I come from a region where it is assumed that we have water, a lot of water, women from that side. So the women in Uganda drink a lot of things. In fact, if you want to make money in Kampala, just tell women it brings water. So there's all these rituals and stuff that women do, but not for themselves, and I don't find that liberating. So looking at the title, Seeking Sexual Freedom, I don't know if you found anything liberating around the Senga structure.
Yes. Thank you. And I feel like let me just explain for people who don't really know what it brings water means. It brings water is referring to squirting, right? And in some East African communities, it's a point of pride as a man, talking about things men should take inspiration from, for a woman to be able to squirt. The idea being she's actually reached her pinnacle. And at the same time, I have to say that not all women squirt, and we shouldn't feel the pressure to squirt. Okay, so what I found interesting about the idea of a senga, and I just called her sex auntie, right, is the idea that there's this older woman who you can ask anything about sex, and she will answer, right? and I'm sure there are many, many different types of singers, but I interviewed a woman that I called in the book Namusuke, who was Buganda, and she told me about her relationship with her auntie. And for example, if she's watching TV and the sex scene comes, if she's with her mother, she'll get up and leave. When she did the same thing with her Senga was like, why are you leaving? If you see something and it makes you feel something, let's talk about it, you know? And yes, the Buganda also practiced labia pulling. What I thought was interesting about labia pulling is it helps girls to become familiar with their genitalia. Some women have no idea what their genitalia look like. I have led a workshop for adult women where one woman at the end of the workshop came to ask my co-facilitator if she could show her where her clitoris was. This woman had had 3 children. Yes, and so what I think is radical, that labia pulling is literally saying, touch your genitalia. Learn what feels good, what feels pleasurable. What is not so good is the point that you're supposed to be doing this to please your man, right? But then the women are also told, but do it like a massage. Do it like you're massaging yourself, you know? Yeah, and also, you know, in Buganda traditional schools, at least the woman I interviewed, an older girl will be asked, oh, do you mind showing the younger girls what it looks like? You know, as in open your legs so they see. Like, so many girls grow up not even knowing what the genitalia look like. And for me, that's the aspect that's radical. So that's what I'm saying about these rites and rituals. What would it be like to take the positive aspects? And, you know, what would it be like to, okay, this is what your genitalia looks like. You can familiarize yourself with it. You can learn how to please yourself. But it's for yourself. It's not about pull it or elongate it or, you know, anything like that, but get familiar with your own body. So that's what I found great.
Question?
Okay. Yeah, good evening, and thank you so much. Yeah, I'm an American pediatrician based here in Ghana, and I have to say one of my most interesting components of my American clinical practice is talking with parents about self-stimulation for their children. And so in navigating that and in a way that feels safe for everyone and open. And also with my colleagues, it's been something that I've noticed that we've had conversations more over the years. But I think my question is more related to the other end of the age spectrum, and that's menopause. So I remember, I don't know if it was Bell Hooks or Audre Lorde I was reading some years ago, and talking about that liberation that comes with menopause, right? No longer having that procreation drive and that, you know, that risk of pregnancy that comes with sexual encounters. And so I think, you know, for myself, I've always been grateful for contraception, but also recognizing the limitations that come with, you know, hormonal contraception. I eventually had my tubes removed because my ex-husband, you know, wouldn't get a vasectomy, which was far safer, but removing your tubes actually does reduce your risk of ovarian cancer, because much of ovarian cancer is actually tubal you know, cancer. So I rationalized it that way. But I think that's, you know, that's something that I do wonder. And then I'll also just find, if you could just comment on that and what that means. But then finally, this also reminds me what you were talking about for the elongated clitoris. It reminds me of something from what Wole Soyinka talks about, is that essentially a penis is just an elongated clitoris.
Yes. And just to say, it's elongated labia, not the clitoris. That's what the elongates, yes. So what was your question? Yeah, I'm looking forward to experiencing that. I feel like I don't have much to say. I'm perimenopausal. I assume I am. I'm 48 years old. I have definitely felt my desire wane recently. I know, Kina, like the way you're looking at me, I mean, how can you write about sex and not be as like... But I also think it's the stage of life in which I am now, right? Like, I'm busier than I've ever been. I have a 6-year-old. I also live in Tema. You know, when I used to live in East Legon, it was much easier to arrange hookups. But I'm coming back to Accra in 2 months, so please, fill up my calendar.
I think one of the gaps I wanted to talk about was the role of... let me be very specific, metabolic health and sexuality. Like, I coach people to reverse diabetes. And one of the things I get the men with is that if you're not, you know, when you wake up in the morning, you should have a healthy boner as a man. Women should wake up feeling sexual desire in the morning. The mornings, because you've slept, All your biological functions should be firing when you wake up. And the men will be like, yeah, you're right. I don't remember the last time I felt like a good erection in the morning, right? And I'm coming back to the issue with menopause. I'm menopausal. I'm very happy to be menopausal. Like, I can't get over the fact that I don't have to worry about these things anymore. But I also think that with menopause comes aging, and sometimes it's mixed up in there because some of these diseases reach ahead as you are going through menopause and you are starting officially the aging process, let's say 60, 65, right? But I do think that there is a real value for older women to rediscover. I'm looking at you, look how gorgeous she is.
No, I actually want to say something.
Yes.
Because in sex lives, the woman who I thought had the most amazing sex lives were older women. I interviewed a 71-year-old woman and a 60-year-old woman. And it's because of them that I feel very, very chilled. Yes. Because I'm like, there's no rush. I have my 60s, I have my 50s, I have my 60s, I have my 70s. Maya Angelou also spoke about how vibrant her sex life was in her 80s. So I think the media like to feed us. It's true. I think the media like to feed us a diet that assumes it's young women who are sexual. But I feel like young women haven't yet discovered themselves, right? And probably, like most of us, have been socialized to please men. And the older you get, the less fucks you give. And so you get more confidence in who you are.
And especially if as an older woman, make a point of shedding those responsibilities that weigh you down. Hopefully you don't have a man who suffered a stroke that you have to look after all the time. I mean, I'm just saying that, what I'm saying is that sexuality for women is wrapped up in all these other things that we have to do. And so it is really rather, it's burdensome and unfair on us to have to go through our childbearing age, having children, maybe getting married, spending all that labor, and then just as you are free of particularly the labor of looking after children, then society comes around and says, oh, by the way, you're old. You are past your use-by date. Where if you are a middle-class woman, you probably have never been more resourced than at that time. You are at the height. In fact, women who are like 50s, you are at the height of your intellectual prowess, maybe in your career. It's really sad that all that comes to a head and then they are like, oh, you're old. We have retired you from sex. We have retired you from pleasure. We have retired you from all these other things that should give you pleasure, precisely because the men actually maybe are winning in their own pleasure journeys. We are very different.
This is why I think there's a lot more conversation now about the older woman, younger man dynamic, right? I think it exists for a reason.
Yes. So I just want to tell us that we ourselves should bulk at retiring. If you are ready to retire yourself from a lot of things, that's fine. But make a mindful decision. You know what I mean? When Audre Lorde talks about, I interpret the Audre Lorde thing about self-care to include all of these things. Because somebody like Nana comes along, and when you read the book, whatever age you are going to have to, and I'm saying she's insisting on it I insist to say that. Because you are confronting, there's no way you are going to read the book and not be confronted with your own sexual journey, the assumptions that you've had, the ways in which we cut ourselves off from experiences and pleasure, the way everything that we do must be somehow utilitarian, must be geared towards just, even that passage about getting dressed in the morning, you know what I mean, and oiling yourselves, and all these things that we as women should be doing, because precisely we have time now, even as older women. So that's what I want to say. I just want to say that.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, whilst we're waiting for people to think about
One
that,
more
I
question.
have
yes.
one.
You have a question? You have a question?
Okay.
No, she has a comment, please. You've talked.
Comment,
You
yes.
said the thing.
Speaking about the aging, 35 years ago moved to the village of Kokrobite, I was introduced to the sugar mummy, which I think responds to this older woman. You know, it's a kind of institution in traditional societies.
Yes.
And I also think, and I don't know as much, but I am a student of traditional Ghanaian knowledge, and it amazes me across the board, aside from the sugar mummies that had, you know, was being satisfied by young men, and they had some resources helping the young man through school. It was a kind of win-win situation. And
Yeah.
am I wrong?
It's a
I'm just-
win-win.
You know, and also all the kind of what we knew as so-called secret societies. You know, when we talk about homosexuality and we're so influenced by the West, one thing we should know about the West is everything goes in extremes. You know, a gay man or a gay woman was absorbed and recognized in traditional societies. When all of a sudden that becomes like a movement, if you will, you had men who, societies where women massaged women, men were with men. There was a kind of acknowledgement of the duality of sexuality in all of us, you know. And so for me, right now, I'm really excited by this conversation. I was a bit skeptical when I first came in. But to be honest, it's really, I think, awakening us across the board about reclaiming culture, not just the symbols of culture, but the intelligence behind those cultures. And I really think at this juncture in the development of our nations, and I claim that as a diasporan, that we are really obliged to be very conscious, because this conversation goes across the gamut of how we live.
Yes, yes. Thank you. And also, yes, let me sell the book. You know, when she says the conversation goes across the gamut of how we live, there is so much Nana packs in there. Because, of course, women's sexuality and sex, and she talks about a lot. So, yeah, the book is there. Question?
Yes, there's one question, yes.
Yes. Hi, Nana.
Hi.
So, you mentioned earlier before about what people are saying about you can't vouch for all men because men will embarrass you. And because of that, embarrass you. There's so many women that are deciding to be celibate. So I wanted to hear, what's your take on a woman or women who are choosing celibacy but also seeking sexual freedom?
Yeah, I think there are many paths to sexual freedom, and for some women, celibacy is a part of that, right? It's a way to stop what they have done automatically. I've interviewed women who have spoken about, like, it almost felt like they were having sex not because they wanted to have sex, but to please men. And so some of them made that intentional choice. I don't want to be this person who is just offering up my body. I need to pause. I need to invest in myself. I need to travel. I need to learn. I need to build a business. You know, and for me, that makes all of the sense in the world, you know. I feel like it's a legitimate choice. And I also feel the choice to have multiple partners also as a way to sexual freedom is legitimate. You know, for me, all those parts are legitimate. I don't rank one above the other. It's really about you, the individual, and what works for you. And you haven't taken some time to think about it and to figure it out. Because I think the challenge is many of us do not get the opportunity to take the time and think about it and figure it out for ourselves, right? So I think for me, it's about the intentionality behind the choices that you've made. You know, I think it's different when you find yourself in a path of enforced celibacy, because, for instance, you've been told that the only legitimate way to have sex is when you're married, and you're not married. But you know, and so you probably end up getting married just so you can have sex. That doesn't feel to me like a path to freedom. But I think saying, hey, I need to pause. I need to, like, get into myself, think for myself, and stopping sex as a way to do that. That sounds to me like a very healthy path to sexual freedom.
Okay.
Yes, there's a question here. There's a question here we can do.
Hiya. Just want to start by saying thank you and echo everyone's thanks as well. I'm pretty sure when I was reading your first book, I'd reached the end of every chapter and I'd text a friend like, you need to read this book, you need to read this book. But my question is around how you navigated your journey when you were seeking and seeking sexual freedom as a young person, and how you grappled with attitudes projected from elders around you or relatives. I suppose now that you have been writing for a long time, it's probably easier because people are already aware of what you write about. But when you began, how did you deal with those kind of projections?
I mean, I began when I was 30. I don't remember anybody's. I think my mom was like, when she first read my blog, she was like, Interpol is gonna come and catch you. Interpol did not catch me. You know, yeah.
What did your father think?
You know, my dad, when I started writing my book, every time I come from a residence, he'd be like, have you finished? Have you finished? And then the next breath, he'd be like, I didn't want to know about your sex life, you know? And when my mom read Sex Life, she was like, it's a good book. So many people are anonymous. Why couldn't you also be anonymous? So what I would say is my parents are supportive, but they just wish I would do this anonymously.
All right, so this will be the final one. So I see so many pieces of act of resistance in you in the book. And there are two bits that I was wondering, is it intentional, is it out of resistance? And this is when you quoted All About Love by Bell Hooks. You spelled her name all in small letters. And you did the same with Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good with Adrienne Marie Brown. You also spelled her name all in small letters. I'm just curious, is there any reason why?
Oh, that's a very easy question to answer, because that's how those writers spell their names. So, and they do that as an act of resistance. So I couldn't spell their names any other way other than the way they spell their own names.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a great conversation. At this juncture, we would like to...
I have something to say.
Yes, please.
Yes. I want to say that I'm going to guess that most of us, and I could be wrong, and if it's wrong, forgive me. I am going to guess that most of us in this room are heterosexuals, are straight. When that hateful bill is passed that seeks to disenfranchise and dehumanize our own citizens here in Ghana, we won't be able to have this sort of conversation. That hateful bill is a greater threat to you straight people. I want to make that clear. It's a threat to the conversations of enlightenment you want to have. It's a threat to doctors who are seeing patients. It's a threat to your family members. It is a greater threat to straight people. So please do not be quiet. And do not act like there's nothing that Ghana can do, there's nothing that we can do to stop the passage of this bill. Because above everything else, it is state-sanctioned pure hate. There is the worst crime on Ghana's books is the acts of treason against the Constitution and the Republic of Ghana. This bill has things in it that are not in our treason bill. And for instance, it outlaws sympathy. It's not human to outlaw sympathy. First of all, it can't be done, and it is outright just evil. So I'm just pointing out. You've had a lovely conversation. It will not be happening when the bill is passed. Yes. Yes. Yes.
The good thing is the conversation doesn't end here and now. It will continue. At this juncture, I would like to call on the director of NYU Accra, the man who's put together all the 19 editions of Laboni Dialogue, Frankie Idozian.
Who I also cite in my book, by the way. Frankie, thank you for your work.
Do you guys know he's written one of the memoirs of, have you bought the book? Have you read it? Okay.
Thank you to everybody on the live stream. Thank you for tuning in. It's incredible that we have gotten to 19 Laboni Dialogues. That's just really wonderful, and it is a testament to all of you. in Accra, in our community, on the live stream, that we can have these kinds of wonderful conversations. Very special thanks to Kina, who always likes to spice things up. Thank you for bringing up the fact that, you know, if this hateful bill is passed, then Laboni Dialogues is in serious trouble, because this is a safe space for all kinds of wonderful conversations. I do want to thank everybody on behalf of all of us at NYU Accra. Nana, this is not your first time on the NYU stage. I hope you recognize that this is your home, your intellectual home. Whenever you have new work, please come and share it with us. We're very, very happy to have you. The Laboni Dialogues would not really be what it is without all of our community members. Many of you know that New York University is a private institution in the public service. And this public service cannot happen without partners. And one of our partners is the wonderful Legon Panwine Band, who has been serenading you and will continue to serenade you as we move on to the refreshment portion of our evening. Also, we want to thank Sparkling, who makes this place so clean and so beautiful and so wonderful for you. We want to thank Avis Ghana for their help in always giving us the wonderful transportation. We cannot forget our friends in the diplomatic community, particularly our friends at the U.S. Embassy, who show up for every single Laboni Dialogues and are very, very supportive of us. So thank you. Thank you to all of them. So many of you have heard me say this before, and I will say it again. Writers need to eat. We are hungry. There's food out there, but that's not really what I'm talking about. You know, our partner in Laboni Dialogues from the very beginning has been Writers Project Ghana. There are several tables there, and there are wonderful books from African writers. It is imperative that all of you buy the 2 books we've talked about and more. Buy for your friends, buy for your lovers, buy for your labia pullers, buy for your children. So don't leave here without getting a couple of books. Because we're a university, you know, we are really interested in literature. And one of our partners that we have been working with, which is in terms of trying to make sure that people in Ghana get to read, is Basics International out in Choco. They have been with us from the very, very beginning. And once you have bought books, think about visiting Basics International in Choco, because we are on a mission to get everybody reading something other than the Bible or the Quran. Our wonderful religious texts are wonderful, but many African creatives are producing the most incredible works. So after you buy Nana's book, she will be at a table over there, and you can get it signed. Everyone, please mingle, have your refreshments, and on behalf of NYU Accra, we thank you. The 20th edition of Laboni Dialogues will be somewhere. As was alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, this particular space will not be available to us when we return in the fall, but there will be a 20th, a 21st, a 22nd, a 30th, maybe even a 40th Laboni Dialogues. So all of us at NYU Accra ask you to just continue supporting each other, continue reading books. Books saved my life, they will save yours, and we thank you again.
Thank you very much, Frankie. Thank you. You know what they say? You buy a book, you read a book, and you book your space in heaven. And one copy is actually sold out. There's another copy left going for 150 CDs. Nana is here, she will sign it for you. So please, I'm not saying you should rush, but just a few copies left on the table. The conversation is just the first half. After this conversation, you grab refreshment, and then the networking and the continuation of the conversation continues. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good evening.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that maybe. let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Hey baby, sorry, say, can I go for good? Let's talk about sex, let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. We take a double room, I want a moment, you romance.